I should have buried the folklore. That's the thought that circles my mind every time I try to sleep. We were all too arrogant, seeing the desert, the forest, and the lake as places of escape. You pride yourself on surviving isolation, thinking logic will save you from things that should not be real. You are wrong. By the time we realized the thing outside knew more about us than our own families did, the line was unplugged, and it was too late. This isn't just a story compilation. Tonight, we present 3 true terrifying Skinwalker stories. Tales that exploit the silence of the gas station, the paranoia of the fire watchtower, and the devastating echo of grief. Get comfortable. This is going to be a sleepless night. Before we step into the terrifying isolation of these forests and deserts, let's get some engagement going. Please hit like and subscribe for more true horror animation. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? And what is your favorite cryptid? Now, turn off the lights, settle in, and make sure you stick around for the end of this compilation. It's the only way to ensure you experience a truly sleepless night.
Story 1. The Unplugged Line. I was 22, and I was paid minimum wage to be a human nightlight. That's the thought that consumes me every sleepless night since October 2017. I thought I was ready for anything the desert could throw at me. I was wrong. The worst part about working the graveyard shift at the Interstate 10 gas station wasn't the hours. It was the unnatural silence. It felt like a vacuum pressing on the single pane of glass, separating me from 200 miles of nothing. I was too arrogant, too focused on the paycheck to believe the old stories about things that move in the shadows out there. And by the time I realized the thing outside knew more about my family than I did, the line was already unplugged, and it was too late. It was 3 in the morning, October 17th, 2017. I was trying to fix the sticky button on the ancient cash register when it happened. The station phone, the crusty old rotary model that hadn't been connected to the outside world since 1998, began to ring. It wasn't just ringing. It was cutting through the silence like a knife through skin. I need you to understand something. I'd taken this job specifically because nothing ever happened. The quick stop just outside Tonopah was a glass box in the middle of nowhere. 4 pumps, 1 flickering overhead light, me. That was it. The nearest town was 40 minutes away, and during my shift not a single car passed by. I'd always been the type who prided himself on isolation. The desert was pure. Quiet. It didn't demand anything from you, unlike the dead-end town I was saving money to escape. My shift started at 11 p.m. I spent the first hour scraping old gum off the counter with a spatula just to have something to do. The desert wasn't like a forest. There was no hum of life. It was silent, too silent. Even the wind, when it came, felt thin, like it couldn't be bothered to carry sound. The only noise was the low, steady hum of the ancient fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional creak of the building settling in the cold. I finished my coffee around 2:30, checked the security monitor, 4 feeds showing static pumps and endless black sand. Nothing moving, nothing alive. I leaned back in the creaky office chair, closed my eyes for just a second. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was the fridge kicking on, but the noise was distinct, sudden, impossible. The phone was ringing. Ring. Pause. Ring. My head snapped toward the counter. The phone, that beige rotary relic, was sitting on the dusty shelf. Its cord was cut cleanly near the base, the end curled like a dead snake. It hadn't been plugged into the wall, let alone the phone line, for almost 20 years. The manager told me that, on my first day, said it was cheaper to leave it there than remove it. But it was ringing. It's just the fluorescent light, I muttered aloud, trying to convince myself. Just a short or something. The sound of my own voice helped, though it came out shakier than I'd like. The ringing stopped completely. The silence that followed was worse than the noise itself. I kept my eyes locked on the receiver, watching it like it might suddenly move. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 5 minutes, I told myself I was imagining things. First night jitters. But then I noticed something on the security monitor. Feed 4, the one facing the abandoned access road out back, flickered. Not static. A deliberate blink, like something had passed in front of the camera. I leaned forward, squinting at the grainy black and white image. Nothing. Just empty road and darkness pressing in from all sides. I tried to relax, tried to convince myself it was nothing, but exhaustion didn't come easy after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I heard a faint, deliberate tap outside, like a pebble hitting the glass. But each time I sat up and listened, there was nothing. Around 4 a.m, curiosity got the better of me, or maybe it was stupidity. I reached for the phone, lifted the receiver slowly, and put it to my ear. Empty, only dead air. And then softly, too softly, I heard it. A voice. "Caleb, there's something in the house. You need to come home now." I nearly dropped the phone. The voice was my father's. Frantic. Demanding. The exact tone he used when he was truly scared. The one I'd only heard twice in my life. Once when my brother had the accident. Once when Mom got sick. But my father and I hadn't spoken in 2 years. Not since the fight. Not since I'd told him I was done with that family and that town and everything that came with it. I slammed the receiver down, heart hammering against my ribs. The voice had been flat, hollow, like it was being played through old speakers, but it was perfectly clear. Crystal clear. The phone wasn't receiving a signal. It couldn't be. The cord was cut, but something had been transmitting through it, broadcasting into the dead copper wire. I sat there rigid, gripping the baseball bat I kept under the counter, the one the previous attendant had left with a note that just said, "For emergencies." Hours crawled by before I risked moving. I kept my eyes on the windows, on the door, on the security monitors. At dawn, the desert looked normal. Blue sky stretching across the high, flat horizon, the highway glinting in the early light. I convinced myself I'd dreamed it. Stress, paranoia, too much coffee and not enough sleep. But when I did my morning walk around, checking the pumps and the perimeter, I saw it. The rusted metal bolt on the emergency delivery hatch, the one on the back of the building that I'd checked just an hour before my shift started, had been freshly oiled. There was a thin, black film on the metal. When I tested it, the latch slid like butter. Who oils a bolt in the middle of the desert at 3 a.m? I checked the security monitor again. The screen was completely dark now. I traced the power cord. Still plugged in, still receiving power, but the monitor was dead, showing nothing but black. The day shift guy, Rodriguez, showed up at 7. I didn't tell him what happened, didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. I just grabbed my stuff and headed for my car, telling myself I wouldn't come back. But I needed the money. I always needed the money. So that night, I came back. The second night was worse. I arrived at 11, and everything seemed normal. Same fluorescent hum, same empty desert, same glass box separating me from the void. I'd brought extra coffee, extra cigarettes, told myself I'd stay awake, stay alert, stay rational. The phone didn't ring that night. But around 1 a.m, I started to feel it, that sensation of being watched. Not the vague paranoia you get when you're alone. This was specific, focused, like invisible fingers trailing down my spine. I kept busy, restocked the cooler, mopped the floor, organized the candy bars by size. Anything to avoid looking at the windows, at the darkness pressing against the glass. Around 2, I heard it. A sound from outside. Not the phone this time. Footsteps. Deliberate, measured, crunch, pause, crunch, like someone walking across the gravel near the pumps. I grabbed the bat and moved to the window. The overhead lights illuminated maybe 20 feet past the glass. Beyond that, nothing but black. I pressed my face close to the window, cupping my hands around my eyes to block the interior light. That's when I saw the figure. It was standing just at the edge of the light. Tall. Too tall. Its arms hung at its sides, and its posture was wrong, hunched forward like something pretending to be human, but not quite getting it right. For one desperate second, I thought it was a lost hiker. Someone who'd broken down on the highway and was looking for help. Then it stepped closer. The limbs were too long, the joints bent at wrong angles. Its skin, what I could see of it in the dim light, was pale and waxy. Its face was slack, expressionless, with eyes that were wide and glassy like a doll's. It moved closer to the window, close enough that I could see its breath fogging the glass. Except it wasn't breathing. The fog appeared, but its chest didn't rise or fall. Then its face shifted. Like wet clay being molded, the features rearranged themselves. For a moment, I was looking at my brother, then my ex-girlfriend, then someone I didn't recognize. The changes were subtle but wrong, like looking at a photograph that's been slightly distorted. It smiled. The smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. Then it pressed its hand against the glass. The fingers were long and black, ending in points that scraped against the window with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "Help me," it said. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The words didn't match the movement of its lips. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. The bat clattered to the floor. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at this thing wearing faces I knew, faces I'd loved, faces that had no business being here in the middle of the desert. It began to move, not away but around. A slow, deliberate walk around the perimeter of the gas station, stopping at each window. At each one, it would pause, press its hand against the glass, and show me a different face. My father. My mother. People from town I hadn't thought about in years. Always watching, always smiling that too wide smile. I collapsed behind the counter, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course there was no signal. There was never signal out here. That's why they still had the landline. The dead, disconnected landline that had rung with my father's voice. The creature circled the building 3 times. Each time I heard its footsteps. Each time I heard it testing the door handle, the scrape of those black fingers on metal and glass. Then, as the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, it stopped. I waited until the sun was fully up before I moved. My legs were numb. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. But I forced myself to stand, forced myself to check the windows. And that's when I saw them. Handprints. Dozens of them, smeared across every window. But they weren't prints of something trying to get in. All of them, every single one was pressed against the glass from the inside. Like the thing had been in here with me, pressing outward. The gas station wasn't a refuge. It was never meant to keep me safe. It was a cage. The creature hadn't been trying to get in. It had been trying to make me panic. Trying to make me so terrified that I'd bolt out the door, out into the open desert where there was no glass, no walls, no witnesses. I drove until the sun was high in the sky. No, until the desert was nothing but a smear in my rearview mirror. I never went back. Never collected my last paycheck. Never even called to quit. That was months ago. But some nights when the world is quiet and I'm alone in my apartment, I hear it. Not my father's voice, not my brother's, not my ex-girlfriend's. It's my own voice coming from somewhere behind me, low, mocking. "Hey, you awake?" And I know that whatever was out there in the desert, it followed me home. It learned my voice, my face, my patterns, and now it's just waiting for the right moment to use them. Story 2. The Fire Watcher's Reflection. I should have trusted the routine. That's the thought that circles my mind every time I replay that week in June of 2020. If I had just stayed focused on the horizon, kept my eyes on the tree line where they belonged, maybe I wouldn't have looked down. Wouldn't have seen the reflection in the glass that didn't match my posture. Wouldn't have heard my own voice echoing from a place no human could reach. But I was too meticulous, too reliant on order and control. And by the time I realized the thing outside was learning my patterns, studying my movements, absorbing everything about me, it was already too late. The Fire Watchtower in Olympic National Forest was supposed to be my sanctuary. 80 feet of metal skeleton topped with a glass box, miles from the nearest trail, accessible only by helicopter. No campgrounds, no hikers, no social demands, just me, the radio, and an unobstructed view of 200 square miles of dense, dark forest. I'd requested the assignment specifically. After everything that happened with my sister, after the funeral, after the month of well-meaning friends who didn't know what to say, I needed isolation. I needed the kind of silence where you could hear yourself think, where you could organize your thoughts into neat categories and file them away. Control. That's what I needed, and the tower offered it. They dropped me off on June 3rd. The helicopter pilot, an older man who barely spoke, helped me unload my supplies and gave me a single piece of advice. Radio check every 12 hours, he said. No exceptions. Miss 2 checks and we come looking. Then he was gone, the sound of the rotors fading into the distance until all I could hear was wind moving through the trees. I spent the first day organizing. It's what I do when I'm anxious. I arranged my ration packs alphabetically, Set up my sleeping bag with the corners perfectly squared. Used a level to ensure the map table was exactly flat. Every pencil lined up, every supply labeled and logged. By the time night fell, the tower was perfect. Everything in its place, everything under control. The forest was different up here than I'd expected. It wasn't quiet, not like the desert or the plains. It hummed with life. Birds calling, wind rustling through branches, the occasional crack of a tree settling. It was predictable, rhythmic, almost soothing. That first night, I radioed in at 2100 hours exactly. Base, this is Ranger Finch, all clear. Visibility good. Repeat, all clear. The response came through clearly. Copy that, Ranger Finch. Stay safe up there. I made tea, read by lamplight, watched the stars emerge one by one through the glass ceiling. Around midnight, I finally felt something close to peace. That's when the fog rolled in. It didn't drift in gradually like fog usually does. One moment, the forest was clear, the stars visible. The next, thick gray clouds pressed against the glass from every direction. The visibility dropped to 0 in seconds. The forest sounds changed, became muffled, distant, like someone had wrapped the entire tower in cotton. I didn't think much of it at first. Coastal fog is normal in Olympic. Heavy, fast-moving. I made a note in my logbook. 2347, dense fog, visibility 0. I was about to settle in for the night when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a voice, faint, distant, coming from the radio. I moved to the desk, watching the radio even though it was silent now. The fog pressed against the windows like something alive, obscuring everything beyond the glass. Then it crackled again. Static, followed by words. Base, this is Ranger Finch, visibility 0. Repeat, visibility 0. My blood went cold. Those were my exact words. The exact transmission code I'd sent to base 30 minutes earlier. Same phrasing, same cadence. But I was hearing it now, broadcast back to me on an unauthorized frequency. I grabbed the mic. Base, this is Ranger Finch. Did you copy an additional transmission from this location? Long pause. Then, negative, Ranger Finch. Your last transmission was received and logged at 2100 hours. Is there a problem? I looked out at the fog, at the nothing beyond the glass. No, I said. No problem. Ranger Finch out. I told myself it was signal bounce. Radio waves doing strange things in the dense fog, atmospheric interference. There were a dozen rational explanations. But as I sat there in the lamplight, watching my reflection in the glass, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there in the fog. Something that had heard my voice and was practicing it, learning it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard sounds. Faint movement below the tower, branches snapping, the creak of metal like something was climbing the support structure. But each time I sat up and listened carefully, there was nothing but the muffled silence of the fog. Around 3 in the morning, I thought I heard singing. A lullaby. One my sister used to sing when we were children, before the accident. Before everything fell apart, I sat rigid in my sleeping bag, barely breathing, listening to that familiar melody drift up through the fog. The words were right. The tune was right. But the voice was off. Too flat. Too mechanical. When dawn finally came, the fog was still there. Thick. Impenetrable. I could barely see the railing around the tower platform. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Sleep deprivation. Grief. The mind playing tricks in the isolated darkness. But when I went out to check the platform, I saw them. Small, perfect circular indentations in the metal grating. Like wet fingers had pressed into the surface and dried there. They were arranged in a spiral pattern, leading from the edge of the platform to my door. Something had climbed up here during the night, had stood right outside while I was inside, separated by only a thin wall and a locked door. I measured them with my ruler, logged them in my notebook. 2.3 inches in diameter, too large to be human, too deliberate to be animal. That's when I noticed the smell. Faint but distinct, like ozone and something metallic. The same smell you get right before a lightning strike. The second night was worse. I radioed in at 2100 hours, exactly as required. I kept my message brief, professional. Didn't mention the marks, or the strange sounds, or the fog that hadn't lifted in over 24 hours. Base, this is Ranger Finch. All clear. Visibility still 0. Repeat, all clear. Copy that, Ranger Finch. I made dinner. Instant noodles. Kept myself busy with small tasks, checked and rechecked my equipment, organized my already organized supplies, anything to avoid looking at the fog pressing against the glass. Around midnight, I was filling out my logbook when I glanced at my reflection in the window, and I froze. My reflection was sitting at the table, just like I was. Same posture, same position. But as I watched, it moved wrong. Its head turned to look out the window before I turned mine. Its hand reached for the pencil a fraction of a second before I did. I blinked hard, looked away, looked back. Normal now, my reflection matching my movements perfectly. I told myself it was exhaustion, the fog creating visual distortions, the lamplight playing tricks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, learning me, copying me. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it again. The voice on the radio, but this time, it wasn't repeating my transmission. "Don't look down, Alara." My full name, spoken in a voice that was almost mine but not quite. The words I'd thought to myself just minutes before, standing at the railing, fighting the urge to peer down into the fog. I backed away from the radio, pressed myself against the far wall. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. "Don't look down, Alara." Again, closer now. Not from the radio, from somewhere below the tower, from the fog itself. I wanted to scream, wanted to grab the radio and call base and beg them to send the helicopter now, in the middle of the night, fog or no fog. But my voice wouldn't work. All I could do was stand there, trembling, listening to my own thoughts being broadcast back to me from the darkness. The third day, the fog finally began to thin, not lifting exactly, but becoming translucent. I could see shapes now, the outlines of trees, the suggestion of the forest floor far below. I should have felt relief, should have felt safer with visibility improving. But all I felt was dread, because now I could see the figure standing in the fog below. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its proportions were wrong, limbs too long, body too thin. It stood perfectly still, about 50 feet from the base of the tower, just visible through the thinning fog, and it was looking up at me. I grabbed my binoculars with shaking hands, focused on the figure. It was wearing my clothes, not similar clothes, my exact clothes. The same jacket, the same boots, even the same faded green hat I'd been wearing yesterday. Its face was obscured by the fog, but its posture, the way it stood, the angle of its head, it was copying me. I stepped back from the railing. The figure below took a step back at the same time. I raised my hand. It raised its hand. I turned to go inside. Through the glass, I saw it turn at exactly the same moment. That night, I didn't radio in at 2100 hours. I couldn't. Every time I reached for the mic, I imagined that thing down there hearing my voice, absorbing it, becoming more like me with every word I spoke. At 2200 hours, the radio crackled on its own. "Base, this is Ranger Finch. All clear. Repeat, all clear." My voice. Perfect replication. But I hadn't transmitted anything. A moment later, Base responded. "Copy that, Ranger Finch. Everything okay up there? We show your transmission came in an hour late." "Affirmative, Base. Just equipment issues. All resolved now." The voice was mine, but I hadn't spoken. The thing in the fog had made my check-in for me. I sat in the darkness, not daring to turn on the lamp, watching the fog through the glass. The figure was closer now. I could see it more clearly. It had my face, my exact face. But the eyes were wrong, too wide, too fixed. Around 3 in the morning, I was staring into the glass when my reflection moved again. But this time, I was standing still. My reflection opened its mouth in a wide, silent scream. Its eyes bulged, its expression twisted into something of pure terror while my real face remained frozen in horror watching. Then it spoke. Not from the radio, not from outside, from inside the tower, the voice echoing off the wooden beams. "I'll take the next shift, Alara. You look tired." My voice, my tone, but layered with something deep and guttural underneath, like multiple voices speaking in imperfect unison. I slammed my palm against the glass and the reflection shattered into normalcy. Just me, pale and terrified, staring at myself. I couldn't stay another night, couldn't risk it. But the helicopter wouldn't come until my scheduled extraction in 5 days, unless I called for emergency evacuation. But if I did that, if I broke protocol, I'd have to explain why. And how could I explain that something in the fog had learned to be me, that it had taken my face, my voice, my mannerisms? They'd think I'd had a breakdown. Maybe I had. At dawn, I made my decision. I grabbed my logbook, tore out every page detailing the last 3 days, and fed them to the small propane stove. Watched the paper curl and blacken and disappear. Destroyed the evidence. Destroyed the record. Then I packed only the essentials and keyed the mic one final time. Base, this is Ranger Finch. Assignment complete. Requesting immediate extraction. There was a long pause. Then, Ranger Finch, you're scheduled for 5 more days. Is there an emergency? I looked out at the fog. At the figure standing below, wearing my face. Negative, Base. Personal reasons. I'm coming down. Copy that, Ranger Finch. We'll have a bird there in 3 hours. I waited by the door, pack ready, not looking at the glass. Not checking my reflection. Not moving from that one spot. When I finally heard the helicopter, I ran down those 80 feet of metal stairs faster than I'd ever moved in my life. Didn't look back. Didn't check to see if the figure was following. The pilot gave me a strange look as I climbed in, but he didn't ask questions. We lifted off, and I watched the tower shrink beneath us until the fog swallowed it completely. It was only when we were miles away, descending toward base, that I noticed something. The pilot was looking at me in the mirror. His expression was confused. Ranger Finch, he said carefully, we already picked you up. My blood turned to ice. What? 2 hours ago, we got a call. Same voice, same extraction request. We sent a helicopter, brought back someone who looked just like you. He paused, his hand tightening on the controls. So which one are you? I'm home now, or what used to feel like home. But I can't stop thinking about what he said. About the thing that called for extraction 2 hours before I did. About what's walking around now, wearing my face, carrying my credentials, living my life. Sometimes I catch my reflection moving wrong. See myself in windows when I know I'm not standing there. Hear my own voice from rooms I haven't entered. And I wonder if I really made it out of that tower. Or if I'm still up there, 80 feet above the fog, while something else wears my skin in the world below. Story 3. The Grieving Mimic. I should have buried her ashes that day. That's the thought that circles my mind every time I replay that week. If I had just scattered them in the lake like I'd planned, maybe the water would have stayed quiet. Maybe I wouldn't have heard her voice calling from the fog. Maybe I wouldn't have seen her yellow raincoat standing on the dock where she used to watch the sunrise. But I couldn't let go. I was too broken, too desperate for one more sign from her. And by the time I realized the thing outside was feeding on my sorrow, learning from my grief, it was already too late. My wife, Clara, died on a Tuesday in August. Sudden, unexpected, the kind of death that doesn't make sense no matter how many times the doctors explain it. An aneurysm, here one moment, gone the next. The lake house in Montana had been her family's for 3 generations. We'd spent every summer there for the 15 years we were married. It was her favorite place on earth. When I asked her once where she wanted her ashes scattered, she'd pointed to the water and said, "Right there, where the dock meets the lake, so I can watch the sun rise forever." It took me a month to work up the courage to go, to make the drive with her ashes in the passenger seat, that old jazz record she loved playing on repeat through the speakers. September 29th, 2023. That's when I arrived. The lake was exactly as I remembered it. Still, glassy, perfect, except for the fog. Dense gray fog that clung to the water's surface like something alive. It had rolled in from the mountains and just stayed. Even though it was early afternoon, even though the sun was bright above, the fog refused to lift. I carried my bags into the house, set the urn on the mantle, right where Clara always kept her favorite photos. The house smelled wrong, stale, empty. None of her scent remained, that faint rose soap she'd used every day. I spent the first hour going through the motions, unpacking, starting a fire, making coffee, all the mundane tasks that let me pretend this was just another summer visit, that she'd walk through the door any minute, complaining about the humidity, asking if I'd remembered to bring her book. But she wouldn't. She was in the urn on the mantle, reduced to 8 pounds of gray ash. The plan was simple. Wait for sunset. Take the urn to the dock. Say my goodbyes, let her go. But every time I looked at that urn, I couldn't do it. Scattering her ashes felt too final. As long as I kept them, kept that small piece of her with me, she wasn't completely gone. Night fell thick and heavy. The fog grew denser, pressing against the windows. I couldn't see the dock anymore, couldn't see the water, just gray nothing swallowing everything beyond the porch light's reach. I put on her jazz record, that scratchy 1940s recording she'd found at an estate sale years ago. Let it play while I sat by the fire, the urn beside me, pretending she was just in the other room. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A laugh. Clara's laugh. Not a memory, not imagination. It was real, wet, echoing across the water from somewhere in the fog. My head snapped toward the window. The laugh came again. That distinct musical sound she made when something genuinely amused her. Probably a loon, I muttered, but my voice came out hoarse, unconvincing. Loons don't laugh like that. Nothing laughs like that. I moved to the window, pressing my face against the cold glass. The porch light illuminated maybe 10 feet of dock before the fog swallowed everything. The water was invisible. The far shore was gone. It was like standing at the edge of the world. The laugh came again, farther out this time, drifting across the water. I told myself I was hearing things. Grief does strange things to the mind, makes you hear voices, see faces, imagine impossible things. But deep down, I knew. That was her laugh, exactly as I remembered it. I didn't sleep that first night, couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard sounds from outside. The creak of the old wooden dock, the gentle lap of water, and beneath it all that laugh, distant but persistent, calling from the fog. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something else, singing, soft, melodic. The exact song from the jazz record, but the words were wrong, off-key. The voice was Clara's, but it had a metallic quality, like it was being played through damaged speakers. I sat up, heart pounding. The record had stopped playing hours ago. The house was silent except for the dying fire crackling in the hearth. But outside, in the fog, the singing continued. I grabbed my flashlight, moved to the back door, my hand on the knob, ready to go out there to follow that voice to whatever was making it. Then I stopped, because I remembered something Clara used to say. A local legend her grandmother had told her when she was a child, about things that lived in the fog, things that learned voices, things that lured people into the water by singing songs only the dead should know. I backed away from the door, locked it, checked it twice, returned to the fire and sat there shaking until the singing finally stopped as dawn approached. When morning came, the fog was still there, thicker than before. I told myself I'd pack up, leave, scatter the ashes somewhere else, somewhere without fog and strange sounds and my dead wife's voice calling from the water. But when I went outside to load the car, I found something on the dock, a silver locket. I picked it up with trembling hands, turned it over, saw the inscription I'd had engraved 15 years ago. Forever S. This was the locket I'd given Clara on our first anniversary. She'd worn it every day until she died. It had been buried with her. I'd watched them close the casket, had stood there as they lowered her into the ground. But here it was, on the dock, the chain torn violently from the clasp, like something had ripped it off her neck. I stumbled backward, nearly falling off the dock into the invisible water. The locket fell from my hands, landing with a soft clink on the wet wood. As I watched, the water beneath the dock rippled, not from wind, not from fish. A deliberate disturbance, like something large had just passed beneath. I ran back to the house, slammed the door, locked every window. My rational mind was screaming that there had to be an explanation. The locket could have been lost years ago, could have washed up, could have been found by an animal. But I knew. Deep in my gut, I knew. Something out there had Clara's locket, had taken it from her grave or stolen it from the funeral home, and it had left it for me to find. A gift, or a warning. The second day passed in a haze. I couldn't leave, couldn't stay. I just existed in that space between watching the fog, listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. I kept the jazz record playing on repeat, the same songs over and over. Maybe if I filled the house with her music, I wouldn't hear her voice coming from outside, but it didn't work. Around sunset, I heard it clearly. Silas, my name, spoken in Clara's voice, soft, gentle, coming from the end of the dock. Silas, I'm cold. I pressed my hands over my ears, squeezed my eyes shut. This wasn't real, couldn't be real. Clara was dead, in the urn, on the mantle. This was grief, exhaustion, my mind breaking under the weight of loss. Silas, please, I need you. I opened my eyes. Through the window, I could see a shape in the fog. A figure standing at the end of the dock, right where the wood met the invisible water. It was wearing a yellow raincoat. Clara's yellow raincoat, the one she wore on every rainy day. The one I donated to charity the week after she died because I couldn't bear to see it hanging in the closet. But there it was, bright yellow against the gray fog. Unmistakable. The figure raised its hand, beckoned to me with that familiar gesture Clara always used when she wanted me to come outside, to stop working and join her for coffee on the dock. My legs moved on their own, carrying me to the door, my hand on the knob. Then the figure spoke again, and I froze. "Silas, I'm cold. Come out and bring me the rest of me." The rest of me. The ashes. My eyes snapped to the urn on the mantel. This thing, whatever it was, knew Clara was in there. Knew I'd been too weak to let her go. And it was waiting for me to bring her remains out into the fog, where it could complete whatever horrible ritual it had started. I backed away from the door, grabbed the urn, held it against my chest. The figure on the dock turned its head. The movement was jerky, wrong, like a puppet controlled by someone who'd never seen a human move before. "Bring me the rest of me, Silas." The voice was still Clara's, but cracks were appearing in the mimicry. Underneath her tone, I could hear something else, something old and hungry and patient. I looked at the urn in my hands, at the last physical piece of my wife, the thing I'd clung to because letting go meant accepting she was really gone. And I understood. This thing had been feeding on my grief, on my inability to move forward. As long as I held on to her, as long as I kept her ashes close, I was keeping her half present, creating a space between life and death where something could slip through. The figure took a step off the dock, walked onto the invisible water like it was solid ground. I ran to the fireplace, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the urn. "I'm sorry," I whispered, to Clara, to myself, to the universe that had taken her too soon. Then I hurled the urn against the brick hearth. It shattered. Gray ash exploded into the air, mixing with the black soot, dispersing into nothing. The moment the ashes touched the fire, the singing stopped. The figure in the yellow raincoat stood frozen for a long moment. Then, slowly, stiffly, it lowered its hand, turned away, and walked into the fog, onto the water, disappearing into the gray nothing. I don't remember much about the rest of that night. I think I blacked out. When I woke, it was dawn. The fog had finally lifted. The lake was clear, beautiful, exactly as Clara had loved it. But when I looked at the hearth, where I'd smashed the urn, there was something in the ashes. A bone, long, white, unnaturally smooth. It wasn't Clara's, couldn't have been. She'd been cremated. There shouldn't have been any bones left. But there it was, proof that something had been in those ashes with her. Something that had waited for me to bring her to the water. Something that had worn her voice and her coat and learned exactly how to break my heart. I left everything. Didn't pack, didn't clean, just got in my car and drove until the lake was 100 miles behind me. But even now, months later, I still hear it sometimes. Late at night, when the world is quiet, I'll hear that jazz record playing, the same scratchy 1940s recording, but it's playing slightly too slow, the pitch slightly too low, and underneath the music, I hear her voice. Not calling my name, not begging me to come outside, just singing. That same off-key, metallic song from the fog. And I know it's still out there, wearing her yellow coat, walking on the water, waiting for the next grieving fool who can't let go, waiting to learn another voice, another face, another way to lure someone into the dark. Because that's what these things do. They don't hunt, they don't chase, they wait for us to invite them in. To give them the pieces they need to become perfect mimics of the people we've lost. And by the time we realize what we've done, it's too late. The door is open, and something's already inside. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person I create these stories for. Here's how you can help this channel grow and get more stories like this. First, smash that like button. It tells YouTube to show this video to more horror fans like you. And honestly, it takes 1 second but makes a massive difference. Second, subscribe and turn on all notifications. I post disturbing true horror stories every single week. No clickbait, no padding, just pure atmospheric dread that stays with you long after the video ends. Third, and this is important, drop a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Are you brave enough to watch this alone at 3 a.m.? We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription genuinely helps me keep making these stories. You're not just supporting the channel, you're keeping real horror alive. Check out the video on screen if you want another story that'll crawl under your skin and stay there. I'll see you in the next nightmare. Stay scared.